Welcome to Impact the World, the show for and about creatives, changemakers, and entrepreneurs. This is a conversation episode where a special guest shares with me what they are creating and the behind-the-scenes journey of their experience. Hi, welcome to Impact the World, and this week my guest is Rob Gauthier. I've known Rob now for probably approaching 8-9 years, and Rob is a channeler and has the most compelling story. Not only has Rob's life been so interesting, so he was raised in a loving and Christian family, so his Christian beliefs were a little tricky for him around the idea of channeling. He also went through a whole period in his teenage years and early 20s where he was struggling quite a lot in himself and in the experiences he was finding in the world, before eventually being led to his channeling and his first guide, Treb. So getting to have him on the show today, because he is someone who has been working as a channeler for over a decade, was a real treat. Not only is Rob's story so interesting, he's one of the most generous-hearted people I've ever met in our field. And we have been talking about this, having this conversation for like a year and a half. So finally, we got to do it. And I hope you'll enjoy today's show with Rob Gauthier. And to find Rob, you can use any of the show links underneath in the show notes. And if you are a fan of this show, we're an independent show. So it really supports us if you either subscribe to the channel on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you subscribe to the podcast over at Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating or a review. That helps us reach more people with the work that we are creating and curating every week. For today, I hope you enjoy Rob Gauthier. Rob, it's so good to see you. It has been, I think, since we were in person, maybe 5 or 6 years, I think, when it was the Channel Panel in LA that you and Kalina organized and brought many of us to, and they were always really special events. So good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too, brother. I think it was 2017 was the last time we did the live one with you there.
Wow. And I think the first one we did was 2015, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the first time we got to meet in person. We had been talking for a while over internet and Skype calls, but it was the first time we got to meet.
Yeah. And you know, the thing I always say about you that is so true of you is you and Kalina, you just come with a massive amount of heart. And I won't say that's rare in this field, but when you meet it, it's always a delight because, you know, the thing about you and Kalina, who is your wife and also a channeler and a presenter, and yeah, just you two always bring a ton of that energy, and you always worked very hard to create collaborative channeler events, collaborative channeling communities, which I always took my hat off to you guys around that, because especially the channeling field, it's getting bigger now, but even like 5-6 years ago, it was quite small and quite niche. And so you were like mom and pop kind of bringing us together for these events online and in person. So I salute you guys for that.
Well, I appreciate it. That's something that we had a great passion with, just because we saw how it didn't overlap a lot. You know, a few exceptions, you would see 1 or 2 channelers doing events with each other, but never a bunch of them. And we really wanted to bring that community together. And someone like you with a big heart, it's the same thing. It's beautiful to meet someone like that. And I always tell everyone, I say, Lee's not just one of the most amazing spiritual teachers, self-helpers, channelers that you can meet, but legitimately one of the better-hearted human beings that I've ever met. So I always love getting to spend time with you, talk to you, see your videos online. It's always wonderful.
Thank you. And you yourself have been quite busy the last couple of years because you and Kalina have a beautiful new daughter. So I know you've had your hands full, and I'd love to talk to you more about the work that you're doing now and going to do in the future. But perhaps could we like wind the clock all the way back for anyone who doesn't know you or your story or know you for your channeling? I'm always fascinated with other channelers. What was your understanding of channeling before you were a channeler? So before you were exposed to this and before it happened to you, like in your younger years, what was your awareness of spirituality, channeling, that whole world? I'm always fascinated by that.
Um, Growing up, anyone who did anything psychic, anyone who did anything dealing with that, my family was very religious. So I was taught this is not okay, it's not godly, it's bad. It's full of either frauds or demon possessed people, that type of thing. It was a very extreme version of Christianity. So this community altogether was just taboo. It wasn't allowed, it wasn't talked about. When it was brought up, it was shut down immediately. So I really didn't have any exposure to that until I started my spiritual journey, and then it was filled with not channeling in the sense the way that we both do it now, but more psychics who would pick up telepathic, intuitions and or actual messages and pass them through. Uh, and going from that extent to channeling was another jump outward for me to take a whole other journey into itself.
So how has it been for your family when you yourself started not only channeling, but working publicly as a channeler? How has that journey been?
The first 2 years, my parents never knew about what I was doing. They just knew I was doing something online, something with videos. And at that time, I wasn't doing it professionally. I was doing it to help people. I just offered my time to the few people who would reach out, and then do just public sharings of the channeling that I was doing. And they really didn't realize that until it was kind of a forced situation. At that point, I started doing it professionally. And then I had started the divorce process with my son's mother. And the terms of our divorce until it was finalized was that whatever parent was staying with my son would be in our mutual house that we shared. And the only place I had to go was my parents. So I had to sit them down and say, this is what's going on. I need the room. I need the internet. I need the computer. I need to be left alone and in quiet for a couple hours every night. And then it was the talk. And, it was actually surprisingly much, much smoother and better than I thought it was going to go. At that point, my parents had done a lot of their own work, and they were surprised, a little shocked, but I just thought they would take it a lot worse, like they would have had I been younger and come to them when they were still actively in the church.
That's beautiful. And I've heard you talk about your younger years and how you were often kind of in, I don't know if you said trouble, but you were in kind of fraught situations sometimes, and yeah. Do you think that was kind of you trying to find a way to express your full self, kind of all of those early years that you went through?
Yeah, for sure. When I was young and going to church, it didn't feel right. It felt kind of empty. The questions I would ask, the unsatisfactory answers, the only thing when you get to a certain point in the conversation, because the Bible said so, or because that's what God says. And it wasn't fulfilling in my own experience. I had friends who moved into a different neighborhood. I grew up in a quite quiet, comfortable, upper class neighborhood, even though my family was very poor. We were one of the few families that were there in town that were, but we lived with a lot of people who were upper middle class and even lower high class, and we didn't really fit in there. And when my friend moved out to another town that was a bit bigger and a bit more diverse, but also came with violence, gangs, drugs, things like that, I wanted to spend my time over there because it was so difficult to stay in that place where I felt so out of touch with everything. I didn't like the church life. I love my family. My family has always been great. We've always been real close and connected with each other, but just that town, growing up in that town, it was not fun. And going out there, everybody was either didn't care about you or didn't, they would accept you for who you were because there were so many different types of people there. It was more comfortable. And the longer time I spent there, the longer I got involved with the gang members, the, drug selling, violence lifestyle. And when it was that, it was one way for me to release a lot of that tension, anxiety, anger, frustration that I had been feeling for years and had no outlet for it. So absolutely, it's very interconnected.
And do you look back on that time now and see it as part of your soul path, or do you see it as, I'm interested in what the meaning of that time is for you now at this stage of your life as who you are. I wonder how you see it now, or what you see it being part of or a stepping stone toward.
Honestly, when I look at that part of my life and I look at right now, the best way I make sense of it is this part of my life included some of the worst parts. It taught me the mindset of the worst parts of my life, allowing myself to be involved with a lot of that stuff. It taught me how people in that situation feel and think. And right now, when a lot of people come to myself for channeling or just to talk to me, I've got people coming from all sorts of ways, people who've lived in big towns and gang neighborhoods, people who've lived in drug addiction, violence, domestic violence. And none of those things, had I not had that part of my life, could I have empathized with at the level or sympathized with at the level I did, or have any form of idea of how to steer those things into a better place. Through that part of my life, as well as drug addiction and all the hardships I went through there, it taught me how that suppressive mindset, how the self-imprisoned mindset or the victimized mindset can release itself. Going from there all the way to where I'm at now, those were tools that were meant to show me. And a lot of people say, I spent 9 years in severe drug addiction later on in my path, after the teenage years and young childhood. And during that time, people say, I bet you wished you wouldn't have wasted your life away or went through the pain and suffering. But every moment of those experiences were actually extremely meaningful and taught me more about myself than I could ever have learned in 20 or 30 years of living life like I was before that. So extremely important parts for me to be able to understand why, how, and where people are coming from.
And all of that makes total sense to me, because I remember when I first met you. So I remember thinking, wow, he's this gentle giant, because you're a big guy too. So you have that presence. And I remember feeling immediately safe with you, and which isn't, always the norm, as we know, but I immediately felt relaxed in your presence, which I paid attention to. And then I also noticed over a series of conversations with you over the years, your high level of compassion and non-judgment. Like, it was very evidenced as very high in you. And so to me, your background and your being able to be in some of the more, if you like, extreme ends of what people go through, it's testament to who you've become today and how you can hold space in a very compassionate, let's say, non-shockable way, because you have that quality.
I appreciate that, brother. And I think a lot of that is very much true in how I've been able to not hold judgment with people. That's probably one of my biggest lessons that I didn't even think of till you just mentioned it. The judgment issue is something that our planet's gone through a lot in the last couple of years, especially. And trying to hold space for people who feel judged or who are judging other people is something I try to do my best. And I know the last 2 years has kind of tested everybody's patience, but that's one thing that I really try to share out to other people is, the people you're seeing as your enemy, the people who you're seeing as the other, they believe and feel and experience what they're doing for a reason. There's a whole reason their mindset is the way it is. It doesn't mean they're a horrible person. It doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean that they're the enemy. It just means that they've formed their whole consciousness around something from their experience that is so foreign to you that there's no way that it can be solved until you guys try to communicate that stuff out. And that's what I think we've been missing a lot in our collective for the last 2 or 3 years. And that's why I've kind of dug back down into that earth energy as deep as I could. First, it's instinctive. When you have a baby, you're like, oh my God, I got to get the baby taken care of. It's almost primal. You got to get deep and dirty in the earth energy to do whatever you can to make sure everything's good. And secondly, seeing how people are treating each other over all the things that have been happening.
Yeah, totally. It's definitely been quite a time, and it's the kind of time, isn't it, that you can sometimes want to crawl under a rock or get off the planet, as I think is the way that many of us can feel or see it, or you kind of have to galvanize yourself or heal, and usually often all three things can be happening simultaneously. And I know when we got on the call, you said that you've been going through quite a deep healing process yourself in recent months and the last year or two. But perhaps for those who don't know you, when did the channeling start, or what did that look like? How did that show up in your life, if it was something that was foreign to you?
Channeling showed up in my life after the drug addiction time that I had. It was a 9-year long drug addiction. It occurred directly after my son was about 2 years old, and I found the extent of his health conditions. He has cerebral palsy, severely handicapped at this point. He just turned 22 recently, in April. And at the age of 2, we knew that he was having issues, just not what it was. And then they're like, hey, here's the news. Your kid's not going to walk, not going to talk, not going to be able to do anything. He's going to be vegetabilized in a wheelchair. At a 21-year-old kid who already was going through massive emotional and mental struggle, I turned to the drugs, and it started with a car accident and prescriptions, and rolled downhill really quick. That was the one time I found where I wasn't fixated on the issues of my life, the problems of my experience. And so I continued, and I abused them and used them, and did it for 9 years until I decided I couldn't do it anymore. It created more suffering, more pain, different levels of that than I'd ever had before, and I couldn't do it. So after months of getting clean, of staying away from the scene and staying away from the people who I'd been using with and buying drugs from and all of this, finally I found some form of tranquility. And it wasn't a lot. It was enough. I remember as a kid going through the old shows like Unexplained Mysteries and things like that. And one of the things that I found that always really fascinated me was spirits. I had experiences as a kid, seeing my grandmother who had died before I was born. It felt real to me when I told my mom. She was shocked, but still was like, it must be a dream, because her Christian belief couldn't, close that bridge. So I wanted to look into that, because I'd been feeling not just tranquil, but feeling emotions that I hadn't felt since before I was a kid, like literally a kid. I felt, sense of love when I was around my animals that I usually just thought were pets, or, looked at them like a lot of humans unfortunately do, as property, hey, this is my dog. And I felt emotional connection and bond with them more than just the pat on the head and, that experience. And I actually felt deep emotions when I'd go into nature, and that was all foreign to me, and it scared me a little, but I wanted to find out what was going on. Through my Christian upbringing, I always believed that there was a God or a creator or something bigger than us. I just didn't think, that whatever the Bible had translated it to be was an actual thing. I think, I thought maybe this is just early people trying to create something in their own mind that levels that bridge for them, that connects the two ends of the bridge. And one group that I had seen when I was looking through, Ghost and stuff was Spiritualism Church. And spiritualism, both are kind of the same thing. And they were in a city that was only about a 45-minute drive from where I was. So I went and visited them. And the first thing they said is, we can prove that God exists, when I was reading up on what spiritualism was. And it's because we can talk to people who've already passed over. I said, all right, well, this was never allowed, let's see, worst comes to worst, I think that they're fake or that they're crazy or that they're just religious nuts, and then I'll be on my way. And I went there, and the first reading was amazing. And this was before social media, or at least that I was on Facebook, or before I was on MySpace. And the guy told me everything about my son, not in the detail, like the specifics, but that I had a child who had very bad problems. And I had never met anyone or talked to anyone in this church before. So I was amazed. And he went into my family history, things that I didn't even know until I talked to my dad afterwards. And I knew that this guy had something there. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know, how it got there. So I hung around and I learned a lot. I learned to meditate when asking everybody, how do you do this? I wish I could do it, thinking it's a natural gift that everyone's just born with. Well, you can do it. You got to learn to meditate, you got to get in sync with that. So I learned a lot. And eventually I had heard lots of things about different types of mediumship where the consciousness of whatever they were connecting to would be more localized in their body than through the thought. And that's when I first was exposed to channeling. And they didn't call it channeling. They just said it was a more physical type of mediumship. So anyway, I hung out there for a while, and I watched them go through religious ideologies, and some that I felt were dogmatic and inner fighting, and the same things that ran me out of the church when I was young. So I had left there with a lot of great lessons and a lot of great people that I found. And I took that into my own hands, and I started looking online for meditations, and bumped into the Hemisync Gateway Experience by the Monroe Institution. And when I started that, I had heard a couple things about it, and I started that, and that's really what got me going. Working with that for several months, doing it hours and hours every day. That's what really connected me to the next level of my ability to channel and meeting my initial guide that I channel. So.
And then how did it go from you having that contact to you sharing it with people? Were you guided to do that? Were you told to do that? Or was that just something that you quickly realized you needed to do?
When I met my guide, the initial time and until almost 2 years went by, and this was all happening in meditation. And what he had taught me and shared with me changed my life black and white. As much as I had changed from drug use to not using drugs and starting my spiritual journey, it changed it, 100% the other way. Not the other way, but more this way, which felt like a bigger change. So I spent my time learning so much and growing and expanding so much. Through my own investigation, when I first met my guide, I thought I went a little crazy, with the experience. So I looked up a lot of things online, and I saw that channeling was a thing and channeling was possible. And my first exposure to another channeler was Jane Roberts with the Seth material. And I asked my guide, I said, can we do what they do? Can you come through and talk to other people so that if people have questions like I've had, that they can get answers? Because I wanted what I had to be accessible to every human alive if they wanted it. I didn't want it to be hard to find. I didn't want them to have to go through 9 years of drug addiction, and going through years of meditation to be able to find that energy. And Trev said, sure, yeah, that's fine. That's something we can do. And I learned a lot of organic things online. I worked with my guides who gave me insight. And then within 2.5 to 3 months, I was able to channel at a very basic level. And I tried it like 4 or 5 times, and then I went straight on YouTube and started sharing it. So
brilliant. And so Treb was your first guide that you met, because I know you've had contact ever since then with a whole range of energies and entities. Did you have any trepidation about sharing online or going public with it, or was it fairly comfortable for you because you just knew it was what you were meant to do?
yeah, for me, there wasn't a sense necessarily of a mission oriented or a feeling like I should or must. I was just so happy with that change. I wanted to be able to give that to other people. So it was almost forced. Looking back at it, I said, if I would have waited another year, I could have started doing it in a better channeling way, being more clear in my channeling, blah, blah, blah. But it was perfect. It was what it needed to be. And it was from that sensation of excitement. And like I said, some people, I've heard their stories and they feel drawn, almost like possessed in the mindset that I've got to do this mission. I've got to help other people. And it was a lot like that, but it was also a level of just like 10-year-old excitement, just jumping up and down at the thought, oh my God, maybe this can help one person, maybe if it changes their experience, 10% of what did mine, it would be worth putting in 100 hours to this. And that childlike excitement is actually what gave me more motivation, I think, than everything else put together.
Yeah. And then can you share anything that you remember as one of the things that channeling changed for you, your perspective or your way of seeing or your way of feeling? Is there anything that comes to mind that you could share with us around those early days and what shifted for you?
Yeah, everything. I came from an understanding that there was something bigger and that was about it. Maybe the ability to talk to entities, beings on the other side was possible. But now learning everything in creation is a part of ourselves instead of the other way around. A lot of people, in different various religions see one God that creates everything, and that creation is small and insignificant. And there's only the power of creation from that one being. And I learned everything I knew before was wrong, that everybody has their ability to put energy into doing whatever it is that they desire to do, to create on a level, maybe not creating entire planets with a single thought, things like that, but saying, hey, I want a better life, and being able to do that. That was something I never thought before. I always thought circumstances ruled us. If we die, do we get another go at this? Do we just stick around in one place for eternity? Do we turn into darkness? And then I had a sense of really understanding how all of the energy on a soul level to human level worked, instead of from a human trying to figure out the soul level.
Mm. And when people come to you, are you noticing? Because my experience with working as a channeler, it took me many years to kind of see this pattern. But I think a lot of people are drawn to channeling, usually maybe because at first they think it's because they want to hear those answers. But most of the time, I think people are drawn to channeling to remember themselves as a channeler. Maybe you're not going to do it as a job, and maybe you're never going to sit there and talk to your guide. But I always, and my guides have said this, that we're drawn back to the frequency that we know exists beyond the veil, and that's part of why we seek out something like channeling. Is that been your experience, or I'm curious?
Yeah, the experience I've noticed more so than others is that what channeling usually offers is a reflection of what's already there for them, and without them believing in themselves, it's hard to see. And channeling reflects back that knowledge that they already had. and it reignites the part of them that kind of goes into self-investigation, self-exploration, self-expansion mode, a lot of time because they believe that's what's needed. So reflecting back to them in the channeling, I've seen that, hey, you're the one who's holding the cards. That's helped a lot. And I think people are catching on too. You know, like if I put myself back 5 years ago, I would say out of all my channeling I did for other people, 95% to 99% would be people coming to me getting sessions saying, hey, I want to talk to Trev or Ardif or whoever. Now, I would say it's probably less than 80%, and the rest of it are people who want to learn to channel themselves, or people who want to troubleshoot those issues to find out how they can trigger that in themselves. So either way, a lot more people are trusting in themselves and wanting to have less external reflections and more internal. And what you said too is perfect, beautiful representation, but I've never even thought of it that way. That's why I love talking to you. You've got such a beautiful heart and mindset that uniquely can express things that I try to think of, and I wrap my brain around it a million times, and you say it once and it's beautiful. So
no, back at you, because I think isn't that the beauty of us having conversations? Because we each, I don't know, we all see things in such different ways, and we all learn from each other through how we each see it. So I was only spurring on from something you said. So we're in a tennis match here. And I mean, God, there's so many things, Rob. I think firstly, you just mentioned Ardif. So let's talk about when the channeler starts channeling many different beings or entities, and that growth journey, which is quite common. I had multiple experiences many years ago with that. I know many channelers that we know and that are out there doing it can be similar. What was that like for you when you started to broaden your reach as a channeler in who and what you were contacting?
Yeah, it was very different for me. It initially came through in ways of doing a book with a guy named Jefferson Biscardi. And when we did the book, he asked Trev, is there anyone else that either lives on your planet or has communication with you, or whatever the case is, that we can talk to? And he said, yeah, and brought in Ardif. And Ardif was the most insightful 20 pages in the whole book. So instantly I felt a connection to Ardif right off the bat. Also knowing that his connection with Trev was very deep, and my connection with Trev was very deep. We had a very mutual connection in Trev. And that helped open me up to want to experience more of what he had to say. That excitement and my own growth in all directions kind of led me to that experience. The example that they always give when they're talking to other people is like if you're in a crowded room and it's really loud. When you first meet your initial guide and start channeling, your consciousness expands. And when it does, imagine your body doing that at the party. You bump into the first person who's a couple feet away, and that's the new entity. And then you start talking with them, you start expanding, you bump into someone else. So it's a part where it's not that those beings weren't there or that they weren't connected to you. It's just the way that you grow, you're stretching out to be able to do that. And that's usually what I notice also with people who channel multiple beings, is that at very first it's one or two beings, and then it reaches out to being multiple after the person grows. Not just as a channeler, because of course channelers do have to grow by practicing channeling, or not practicing, but doing it all the time, by being as close to the energy of what's being taught as possible, to live in some form of happiness or excitement to the best of their ability. All of those things are important and count. And when people, even if they're just touching lightly on the edges, they're growing. And that's the beautiful thing for me. I think consciously, my desire to connect with Ardif came from a place of wanting to learn more intense information. But honestly, I knew too that I had to grow in order to be able to understand the amount of complexity that comes from that expansive type of information. So I knew, it might be a tougher thing to get there, to be able to do that more regularly or to channel him directly. But the information was there, was important enough for me to want to. So again, it goes back to that excitement-based 10-year-old, that wants to do new stuff.
I love it. It's an interesting example you're given too. I really like the person next to you in the party, and because it makes me think about. So, for example, we're both in America right now, and there are people in Japan who we are absolutely connected to, that we can't see, that we don't necessarily know, that we've never met, that, I haven't even yet been to Japan, even though it's a place I really want to go. But we are all here at the same moment in time. So we're all connected. So I always think of it that way too. I want to touch on the ET side, because I know that one of your taglines is the ET Whisperer. And I always find the topic of ETs interesting. For me as a kid, I was obsessed with the X-Files. Like the first 5 seasons of the X-Files, I was about, 11 years old, 12 years old. And anything to do with aliens or UFOs would always pique my interest as a young child. But I didn't really think more about it than, oh, this is entertainment. And then, of course, I get older and I start learning more about, oh, that's interesting. So they've been here and this has been covered up and da 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 da. And then just, the walls just keep collapsing. And then you start to go, okay, well, of course, there is life in the universe. What's more interesting is how interlaced we may or may not be, and how much we may or may not know about that. So, but it's a tricky area, because not unlike what you were describing with more indoctrinated religion, where you're taught to, oh no, you can't speak to a ghost, or no, it's wrong to think that you are connected to a higher power. I think that the same kind of weaving has happened around the idea of life on other planets. And it is interesting to watch that slowly breaking down over the last few years. And those of us who've perhaps known about this for many, many years, we've heard about disclosure for years. I would argue it's kind of happening. I mean, it's been happening for a long time, but it's happening as much as it could. And I say this for anyone watching and listening who's like, oh God, no, I don't want to know. I have a very good friend who's deeply psychic, and she's like, I don't want to know anything about aliens. So I get that it brings a fear up in people. And I also get that it's very easy to judge people who may have experiences around this or beliefs around this as just write them off. And we see it happening in society all the time.
Yeah, it's a very weird subject for a lot of people. I think scientific community beginning to first see the exoplanets out there really helped, because before, scientists said we think that they're out there, but until the 80s, no one ever saw one. And the one they did see in the 80s until the 2010s or 2020s was made from a remnant of a supernova. So it's like, that's not really going to hold much life anyway. So now there's the proof, the thousands and thousands that have just been found in the last 7 or 8 years of planets going around stars that are very local, all the way to a couple thousand light years out. The technology to do that makes it hard for a lot of people, to deny that part, that there is the possibility of other life. The ET thing is a weird energy for a lot of people, I think, personally, because they have experiences and maybe sleep states, dreams, or maybe some other intuition in another life. Whatever the case is, there's always that feeling there. It's the same reason we have fears of spiders, same reason we fear sharks, the same reason we fear, getting hit by lightning, whatever it is. There's trauma that's there on the human collective level. What the trauma is, I could tell everyone what I've heard. I could tell them what I think. I could tell them what other people say. But I don't think that's as important to healing it. The part of us that has to heal it, I think, is happening now. Hearing in the news, on national TV, a lot of people dismiss the news anyway. But everyone's talking about it now. There's possibility of life in other planets. So as a collective, I think it's a very special and unique part, but also, like you said, it's going to bring up a lot of fear, a lot of trauma, pre-related trauma for a lot of people. Me personally, I've always, I was the same way as you were, Lee. The old shows like Unsolved Mysteries in the 80s and stuff, I love that. And, growing into the other ones like X-Files, Star Wars, all of it. But I think people who enjoy that also do from multiple levels of understanding something that our human life experience can't really show us, or tell us. So even though it's a very tricky thing, I think my ability to be open to it is what led me to bring that part of the consciousness forward first and build from there. As weird as it sounds, the channeling that I first heard was the Seth material. But after that, the second one that I had heard after I had met Treb and after I had started my own journey was like Dara Inca with Bashar. And all of that, like he was one of the only people out there that was channeling ETs at the time. So to see that reflected back to me after my own experience was validating. But I also saw through the comments, the videos and things like that, there was trauma. So what I try to do to square away with people to help with whatever comfort level I can is, we're humans in a human body on Earth at a soul level having the human Earth experience. And if there are ETs out there and you can bring that bridge to yourself, then they're also a soul inhabiting a different kind of body on a different planet for a different experience. Consciously on a soul level, everything's the same. We have our individuality, but we all come from that one consciousness of souls having fun or not having fun for some of us in physical bodies. I think it's just an experience to be had. And because it is so alien to us, that's why it freaks us out when we see other beings doing it. We've been told since children that just isn't the way it works. And for those who grew up in Christian places, especially, why would God create aliens? He just created Earth, stuff like that. So it's a hard one to bridge. But I've always said about channeling in general, discernment is part of importance for people, because you have to feel your own intuition to get through anything, and channeling shouldn't be any different. When you listen to the channeling, what I used to do when the source would make me uncomfortable, because with my own trauma with religion, the archangel thing and the angels was really hard for me to get over at first. I just listened to the message, and what sounded like it was right and resonated with me, I accepted it without trying to look at the source. And what I couldn't, I didn't. And what I knew was too hard for me to get over, I didn't attempt until I was ready for it. So, the ET thing is weird and different, but it all comes from the same level of just a different experience with different interpretations of that experience.
But with the amount of different stories I've heard over the years, from friends, some from people I've met, and then when I was doing readings, which I did for about 14 years, I heard a lot of stories of people's contact experiences that opened my eyes and my perception, because the people had no reason to be lying to me about what they were experiencing when they were coming for a session. And I say that not because I was dubious, but that just is how it is. I can imagine that you doing this work and having that title is a really safe place for me to come to if I'm someone who is having experiences that I can't yet explain, or that other people won't talk about or validate. Has that been the case because of your work as the ET Whisperer? You have been, I'm sure, attractive to many people who are in that world or having experiences that they need to have some help with?
Yeah, both traumatic and positive experiences. It's a place where people do feel safe to go through with that, because you're right. A lot of people have that experience and never say anything to anyone. unless they can trust someone, family member, a spiritual teacher, some form of authority figure from their own mindset, whatever the case is. And fortunately, because I've expressed that as just is actually funny. Me and my wife and her mom, who had just passed recently, were all talking. And she said, "Oh, so you're connecting with all these different ETs, kind of like an ET or an alien whisper." And I said, "That's kind of catchy, an ET whisper." So her mom, Kalina's mom, my wife's mom, who just passed, was instrumental in that. And I just remember that now. It's funny how that works. But yeah. So when I just did it because it sounded, cool, and I was like, yeah, it's catchy, and it really has helped a lot of people, excuse me, with their trauma and with their good experiences, just trying to decode them and trying to figure out what they were and how it worked and all that stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I believe, was your radio show, your podcast called The ET Whisperer?
No, that ET Whisper came along after the podcast. I had started the Internet Radio Network, Enlightenment Evolution Network, back in 2013. And I think I started calling myself the ET Whisperer about a year after. So I integrated it into my own show, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. But, it wasn't a direct part of the titling or any of the marketing in the network, no.
Well, I remember being a guest on your show, and that was great. And that was some years ago. I don't even remember what year it was, but I remember really enjoying my conversation with you there. But I specifically remember seeing you interview JP Sears for your show, who, if people aren't familiar with him, is very well known on YouTube for his spiritual comedy and commentary, I would say. And I remember being struck by something JP said to you in the interview, where he basically commended you for your bravery of being a public channeler. And I'd never really heard someone who wasn't a channeler kind of saying that to somebody else. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, I guess, because he was saying, the amount of ridicule, kickback, the stuff that you can have to go through. And that always struck me from that show with him, hearing him say that to you. It was moving, and it was sweet,
Yeah, he's a very sweet guy. And years after he did that show with me, he did a show with Paul Selig.
Yes.
And admitted and came out of the closet as someone who was a regular fan of his and who got many sessions from him. So it was nice to hear him. He said he has weird beliefs, because I said, I know my channeling's a little weird with people from your audience, but, that's the weird beliefs he was talking about. And I think that's why he could appreciate the channeling, because he was already probably pretty involved into channeling at that point.
Yeah. So you went, and as well as doing your private sessions, you created the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. And obviously we've talked about the channel panel that you set up, which was done both online and in person. And I believe you're probably going to keep bringing that back, right, in future years?
Yes, we're actually going to set one up for the end of this year, probably online, as this is the first year we've done it since the baby's been born.
Yeah.
And I'm back to doing personal, online events now again for just the ET Whisper. Kalina is going to be starting her internet radio podcast show back again, as am I. This year, the baby's old enough, and we're finally getting help from external. My sister, Mary, is amazing, and she's been helping us a lot, working with us, working for us now, and it makes our world easier again. So we're putting all of our energy into getting more out, because this is what I really love doing. I wouldn't have missed any of my first 2 years with a baby. I intentionally made sure I was only working for a couple hours every day, because I didn't want to miss any of that time with her. I still don't want to miss time with her, but now, she's going to be growing fast and be adorable. A couple more hours a day won't hurt. And it'll really help the collective, because the time I ended up going on minimal work was the time the collective really needed a lot of people to support them the most. So I still actually feel a little bad, in some ways actually a little guilty, that the timeout just happened to coincide with the time so many people were going through crazy stuff. So
Yeah, but here's the beautiful thing about you. You have such a developed sense of responsibility that if anything, you need to work against that. I know that in you. And there were enough people like, for example, I worked harder last year than I had and I mean, I always work. I'm built to work, but yeah, last year, and I was able to do it because we didn't have kids. So don't worry, everybody who was supposed to show up in that way did their thing, and it's a relay race. So I think sometimes we're running with the baton and sometimes we're handing it to someone else. And I'm really glad you guys are coming back out again. But I'm also really glad you got to take that time, and we know that it will benefit your work, whatever processes you've been through. So Patreon, I just wanted to ask you about that, perhaps, as a system that you've been using. I've often said that if I was starting again from scratch now, Patreon is probably the model I would walk towards as a way of both sharing work, but also, the inevitable costs of work, and not just your own energy and your own time, but the costs that go into producing work on the internet. So I really love that that's something that you guys have been playing with the last few years, and I wondered how that's been going for you.
it's actually going really well. Just today, I had said something to our Patreon group a couple nights ago, saying I think we've been here for about 3 years now. And then I saw my memory on Facebook today, right after we had started, like 3 or 4 months after we had started, saying, "Hey guys, come on over to the Patreon from 4 years ago today." So we've been doing it for 4 years.
Wow, that's gone quick.
Yeah, what led us to that was our conversation that me and Kalina had with you backstage at the channel panel in 2015, because we were really trying to get things ramped up at that time too, as ramped up as it was back then. We were trying to ramp it up more, and yeah. So your ideas had helped a lot with that, and we saw Patreon said this is the thing that Lee was talking about. So we chose to use that platform, and it's done great with us and for us, and it's let us lead back to getting more time with people. Instead of trading 1 hour of my day for one person, I get to help 100 people, twice a month for 2 hours out of my time. Yeah. And then whatever clips from that's used to show for people for free on the YouTube and stuff. So it works out to be much better as what we've wanted to do. But also financially helps us as a family who was working minimally for 2 years now. So, yeah, we do 2 of them per month. The first one that we do on the 15th, it's really fun because on the 5th, we make the post so everyone can get their questions in, but we let the people from Patreon pick subjects that they think are exciting. And then we put them up for a vote, and everybody gets to vote on them. And whatever they pick is what we channel about in depth for the 15th, and then on the 30th, everyone sends in their questions, and they get drawn at random on the 30th of the month, and then we go through and do those. So it's really, really been helpful with us. People tend to love it, and it's an easier way for people to access the information who don't have the money it takes to do private sessions or personal sessions, So It's a win-win-win-win, I think.
Absolutely. And you're so community spirited that I love how that community can wrap around you and you wrap around it, and it be this conversation. So no, it's beautiful.
Well, thank you, brother. You're always too kind. I love being able to do, because I feel that same way about you. You have the natural presence where people want to listen to you, and the heart that allows that to flow even more. And then, because of your heart, what people are hearing when they're drawn to you isn't, convoluted stuff that's going to mess them up instead of actually help them like you do. So I love it.
Thank you. It's funny, I always say if there weren't people on this planet, I certainly wouldn't be here. I've got friends who are here for nature, and I love nature, but I know that I'm here to be with and part of people. That's just my purpose. I'm really clear about that. So yeah. Well, Rob, where would be the best? Because I know you have various places that people can find you online, and we can put various links in the show notes. But for anyone listening or watching now, which would be the best website, a kind of catch-all website for you?
To keep up with the current types of things that we're doing, Patreon is the better place because we verbally communicate through our 2 times a month all the things that we're up to. So that keeps us most recent. Also, my personal Facebook page, I share a lot from there. But YouTube is some place if you want to look at the work or you want to go through the work. We've left close to 10 years of videos up for everybody for free. So there's not much that you can't find there if you just want to dig in and look through the types of channeling and the amount of channeling. Our YouTube channel is the best. But yeah, I think Patreon's where we're trying to move everything over to, and then what we can share on YouTube for free, we will. It's just, it suits us better. And I'm trying to do less personal sessions because doing those does take more time away from family and more time from planning events and being able to go out physically and see people and meet people. Like you said, people are the reason you do life on Earth. And that's the way I feel. I love humans. I love people. And I really want to do whatever I can to help in any way I can to make any part of their journey easier. So I want to deal with more people, not less people.
Yeah, thank you. And is it the ET Whisperer at Patreon? And we will put the link, but for anyone listening who just wants to go straight to Patreon and search, it's the ET Whisperer. And is that the same at YouTube?
Yep, ET Whisper on both Patreon and YouTube. Yep.
Perfect. Well, we will put the links. Rob, it's been lovely to see you. And, congratulations to you and Kalina on your ever expanding family. And yeah, I'm excited for you guys. I'm glad that you're coming back out, but I'm also glad that you've had some time to calibrate differently. And I have no doubt that it will all unfold beautifully into the work that you do in the next few years.
I appreciate it, brother, and I'm so grateful for you being out there doing it, and I send all my love to you and Stephen too.
Thank you, my friend. Well, big love, brother, and thank you for being here, and for everybody who tuned in today. Thank you for watching. We will put all the links to Rob's work in the show notes, and we will see you next time on Impact the World. Hi, I'm Lee. I'm an intuitive, a channeler, a musician, and you may know me from my monthly free energy updates that go out on YouTube and Facebook. You may know me from the Impact the World podcast, but I wanted to introduce you to my members community, The Portal. We've been a community now for 8 years, and my mission and the mission of my team every single month is to bring you wellness content, metaphysical content, anything that's going to support your life as a sensitive, as a healer, as someone who is newly awakening, but also to ground it in reality. So every month we bring you various tools to help you survive, thrive, and expand your life. I know many of you are out there bringing your own special gift or light to the world, and the Portal is a hub that we hold along with our community members to support you on your mission. Every month I do a live energy tune-up broadcast. It's 90 minutes long. It allows me to go deeper on some of the energies that month and how they are affecting our specific Portal community. I also take Q&A. I answer questions from my intuitive standpoint, and I also answer questions from my guides, the Z's, who I channel. These live tune-ups are always available within 24 hours, so if you can't make it live, you will always have the replay to go back and watch again, or to use the timestamps to visit a specific question that you heard that you wanted to replay the answer for. Every month, we will bring you a brand new audio recording. I often keep our community at the top of my mind when I'm creating a new channeled MP3 or a new energy alchemy meditation. And these are always scored and supported by the music of sound healer Davor Bozik. I also do several private behind-the-scenes video diaries. Sometimes these are what we're creating and what's going on here at the studio, but other times it might just be me at home talking about things that I'm noticing, really designed to give you and I an intimate conversation that I wouldn't otherwise put out there into the wider world. Stephen Washington brings you a special body energy update every single month. So Stephen is my husband, and he is also an amazing Qigong and wellness teacher. So I asked him several years ago to start creating some body medicine for us. So he takes the themes of that month's energy update and he expands upon them and gives you a sequence of Qigong movements that are very gentle and easy for beginners, but it's a way of alchemizing what we're going through, and he does it beautifully. So many of our members love that component. Stephen also has many meditations inside the portal, which you can access anytime, and we are expanding our meditation library as these months go on. You receive a welcome bonus of the Intuitive Power live event. So if you've never seen a live event of ours, we had an incredible film crew document our London Intuitive Power event in 2019, and you'll get all 5 hours of that content as soon as you sign up. And finally, we curate special monthly Spotify playlists. 2 different kinds: music to move you, so things that are a little more dancey, and music to soothe you, things that are designed to help your nervous system calm. We love introducing you to new music, and this is curated by our whole team. The Classics Library is another important cornerstone of the portal. It gives us an opportunity to bring you 8 different MP3 recordings from my vast library, but we curate them as to the titles that might be perfect for you at this time. So if you want some extra audio, you can go into the Classics Library and pick a topic that suits you. Alongside several discounts to Portal members, our favorite thing is the energy of our community. So we have a private forum only available to members where you can share with each other, discuss, and learn from each other. So the portal really is a world unto itself, and it will keep expanding as the years go on. But there are some of our members who love every single aspect of the portal, and there are some who are there just for 2 or 3 things. So if you want to try it out for a month and see if it's for you, you can do that because membership is available to cancel anytime, and we look forward to welcoming you in the portal if you choose to experience what it is that we are curating and creating for you here.